Hi, my name's Holly Weir. This is a video of my capstone project for my MSW program through the University of Waterloo. So for my MSW capstone, I chose to do a parallel process of different traveling experiences that I've had throughout my life and link some of those experiences to the MSW program. I chose traveling and pictures of some of the different places that I've been because traveling is something that I'm really passionate about. I really enjoy learning about different cultures and challenging kind of my perspective and getting out of my comfort zone to really kind of take a look at different places and different people and ways of life from a different perspective, and traveling really does that for me. So I enjoy the adventure, the challenges, kind of the ups and the downs, and so I found that there was a lot of links also to the master's program that I've been through over the last 2 years. So I'm going to attempt to kind of link through each picture of the capstone project. I'm going to link kind of the destination and those experiences to the MSW program itself. So having said that, I'm going to start with a picture of me at the University of Waterloo sign. And so I obviously had to travel to Ontario for this part of the MSW journey. And we talked a lot about the social determinants of health and advocacy and social change on campus. And so I really decided to embody this social work competency coming back to Alberta. So I decided to incorporate into my practice a little bit more advocacy than I would typically. And so what happened was I came back to work and started to really engage in kind of dialect with other professionals that maybe otherwise I wouldn't have done. So for example, I was talking to a doctor about using the appropriate pronoun for a transgendered youth, and there was a couple ethical dilemmas that I decided to, bring further up and report just with regards to some of my concerns of what was happening with that vulnerable sector. And so I was having a conversation with my coworker about ethics, and she said, Holly, there's a difference between being ethical and having integrity. We can all have ethics, but integrity is actually acting on those ethical challenges or ethical beliefs. And so she actually brought me a poster to work with a quote on integrity, and I'm actually going to read it for you. So I don't have the poster with me because it's still on my wall at work. And it says, the courage of integrity. So the highest courage is to dare to be yourself in the face of adversity, choosing right over wrong, ethics over convenience, and truth over popularity. These are the choices that measure your life. Travel the path of integrity without looking back, for there is never a wrong time to do the right thing. And so this was a really monumental experience in my social work career, which I attribute to, some of the changes I made directly from the learnings of the on-campus portion of the program. So that was the start of my MSW kind of journey. And so going from Ontario, I then chose to display a picture of my mom and brother and I when we did a family trip to Alaska. And so I chose this picture because my family is very important to me, and I really believe in the power of connectedness. And I'm very, very close with my mom and my brother. And I was worried with the virtual component of the MSW program that it might be really difficult for me to connect with others, and that couldn't be further from the truth. I found that I was able to establish really strong connections with other peers in the program, and we've actually talked outside of the program about other kind of ethical dilemmas or those that work in the health authority, and they've been a really great support network. So I think this is an important part of the capstone project because I am not typically a technology inclined person, and so I did have some concerns about the virtual learning component, and I was really pleasantly surprised to develop some of those connections with some of my peers, so that was important to me. And so the next part of my capstone project is a picture of me at the NICU, which is actually located in Edmonton, Alberta. So I actually had to moved to Edmonton for a couple months for my practicum portion of my MSW. And my experience at the NICU was really monumental in terms of my overall learnings, there were so many challenges and eye-opening experiences and so many great mentors that I met throughout this experience. But I would say that the biggest takeaway that I had from my NICU experience was being a part of some of the research experiences that I had. So I was able to work with some of the neonatologists and other healthcare practitioners as part of the interdisciplinary team. And they actually allowed me to do an ethics proposal for the ethics board because we wanted to do a stress study for some of the moms in the NICU when they had babies admitted. And so we learn a lot about knowledge mobilization within the program, and I really felt disconnected with this term. I couldn't really feel myself identifying as a knowledge mobilizer. But after this experience working within research and studies and the literature review component, I really can identify with being a social worker and incorporating that knowledge mobilization piece, which was monumental for me because I did feel like I had a hard time kind of as a social worker being a part of that approach as well. And so as far as my NICU experience for placement, that was huge for me, was some of the learnings about research and knowledge mobilization and how that's influenced my practice, and I've brought that back with me to my place of employment. So that was important that I showcase that. And so after my experience at the NICU when I was living in Edmonton, I wanted to also show a picture of me when I went to Belize. And so you can see in this picture of my brother and I am being violently ill on the side of the boat, and my brother is having the time of his life. And so this to me really represents the person and environment theory, which stands for person interaction environment, which is essentially developed by Harriet Bartlett in the 1970s. And essentially the purpose of this theory is to really look at some of these environmental factors, relationships, financial situation, housing, all these different components, and how that presents, with regards to somebody's presentation and how that correlates. And so for me, the takeaway is that we work, I guess myself, I work under the medical model. It's very pathological, where we look at diagnosis and treatment, and very seldomly do we look at the larger environmental context of that person. And so I decided to put a second picture with the person and environment theory. So you can see that my brother and I there are holding a giant barracuda, which I caught. So after we were in the deep sea fishing trip and I got really sick, they decided on the way back to drive back the boat inside the reef, which was very, very calm, and you typically don't catch anything there. But I was obviously feeling a lot better where it was calmer, and lo and behold, to my surprise, I was able to catch this giant fish, and it was an amazing experience. And I think it just goes to show that despite being in an uncomfortable situation, sometimes we see clients in our practice that are really unwell and don't present well, and we really have to take into consideration their environment. And so I've been having conversations at case conference and questions around, what other elements of that person's environment are contributing to their presentation, because as you can see, it's very different outcome and result when somebody is placed in a different environment that really works to their strengths and contributes to their overall well-being. So that was a huge takeaway for me, was the implementation of this theory in terms of my personal practice. So I really wanted to depict that, those two pictures from my trip to Belize with my brother, because it's I think it's a good representation of the stark differences when you change somebody's environment. So aside from the trip to Belize, I also wanted to showcase a picture from Thailand. So it's a picture of my spouse and he's scuba diving in Thailand. And the reason why I wanted to show this picture is because after you go scuba diving, you do have to fill out your dive book. And your dive book essentially talks about how much weights you use, the temperature of the water, what type of wetsuit you use. And then you reflect on, what am I going to do differently for the next diving experience based on that specific dive. And so this to me really spoke to outcome measures and patient feedback. And so this is something that we actually don't do in my line of work, is we have no outcome measures whatsoever, which was really surprising to me after learning about outcome measures within the program. Obviously we have the course specific for evaluation of human service programs. And so learning about best practice and incorporating patient feedback, and the notion that we don't currently do this in my line of work, really kind of spearheaded this want for me to incorporate a little bit of that outcome measurement into our current practice at Mental Health Services, which is where I work. And so I talked to a couple coworkers who are really interested in tag teaming kind of this approach to set up a committee. And so this fall, a couple of us are going to be sitting together with management, and we're going to be talking about different outcome measurement tools that we can utilize to really incorporate patient feedback into our decision making, and changing our practice a little bit. So I thought that was a good representation of some of the reflection that we need to do and getting that feedback from patients so that we can better their experience for the next time that they're there. And so the last picture that I chose to showcase as part of my capstone project is a picture of a temple in Cambodia. So if you look very closely, you can see my spouse and I sitting on a step in this giant temple. And believe it or not, this temple is actually part of probably 1/10 the size of the actual temple itself. And so for me, this really represented the MSW program as a whole entity in and of itself, but also as a larger part of my social work career. And so I'm relatively new to the social work field. I've been in the profession for the last 5 years, and this MSW program has been monumental in creating change, incorporating just different perspectives to my practice, different theories and theoretical approaches, things like that. And so I'm so grateful for having such an incredible experience, and I also am looking forward to kind of the next steps to my social work career. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what that's going to look like for me. So upon completion of the MSW program, I'm looking forward to potentially teaching at our local college. So they have a social work diploma program, and they are looking for professors to teach, not really professors, more like faculty members, to teach some of the social work courses, and you need your MSW to do so. And so I think a lot of the leadership components to this program really helped develop some skill set for me to hopefully do that in the next couple of years. And I'm also looking at creating more social change outside of my place of employment. So I have talked to some staff at the local women's shelter, and they do have a board of volunteers where they make kind of larger decisions regarding the local women's shelters, mostly for domestic violence and some kind of crisis situations for women and children. And so they said that I was welcome to be a part of the board to help make some of those decisions. And they don't have actually any social workers on the board right now. And so I really do think that my MSW will help kind of give me that holistic perspective and look at some of those structural barriers to women and children and the contributing factors for some of the domestic violence that's happening locally in our rural communities. So I'm super grateful for the experience that I've had and the skills and knowledge that I've learned throughout the program, especially my field placement. And other than that, I want to thank you for watching my video, and that's about it.